All right. Here today with Zach Cooper. Zach was in the Marine Corps from 2008 until 2012 in Kaneohe Bay in Hawaii. That was around the same time that I was in Hawaii in Pearl Harbor. I'm sure our paths crossed at some point. But Zach, why don't you introduce yourself? Because I'm not going to do it any justice.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. First of all, Nick, it's a pleasure to be here with you this morning.
Absolutely.
Um, so yeah, I grew up born on the West Coast, moved to the near Cleveland area in about fourth grade, and lived kind of bounced around all over the place between that time frame. And then was near West Side suburb to Cleveland, Ohio, from fourth grade through graduation. That was back in 2004, so quite a while ago at this point. And I kind of had a non-traditional path to the Marine Corps. I actually intended to join straight out of high school. Unfortunately, my dad passed away my senior year of high school, and being Iraq in 2004, my mom asked me not to go. Um, Being that she just lost her husband, she was terrified that she might lose a son as well. And I thought that was a reasonable request at the time. So kind of delayed my entry there. And I tried to do a couple other things. I tried to go the college route initially. And I hadn't prepared myself for that up to that point.
Yeah.
So did a few other things, and then uh, got into real estate at the perfect time in the end of 2007. Which obviously being a little sarcastic there because 2008 was the big bubble burst that we all know. And once that happened, I was really trying to figure out what the heck I was going to do. And the Marine Corps had never really left my mind as an option. It just kind of got put on the back burner. And so that seemed like the right time to kind of make that jump into service that I had hoped to do earlier. And from there, it was, history. It's written in the books, as they say.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Some similarities between you and I there as well. I didn't get right out into the military when I graduated. I graduated in '04. You said '04 as well?
Yep. Yep.
Yep. And I bounced around college and I wasn't ready for it yet. It wasn't for me at the time, not until after I got in the military and then eventually found my way into the military in 2007. So same kind of deal. I had a few
Wow.
years between getting out of high school and joining. So um, similar story for sure there. So
Yeah.
you,
Interesting. Interesting.
you mentioned West Side suburb. Which one in the Cleveland area?
Yeah. I grew up in Avon Lake. Great little suburb, just about 20 minutes or so, 25 minutes maybe, west of downtown Cleveland proper.
Yeah, it's a beautiful area, and yeah, definitely. Sorry to hear about losing your father right out of high school. I'm sure that was not an easy time, but I think it sounds like you did the right thing to stay there with your mom and be with family out there in Avon Lake. So love that area. Um, and tell me a little bit about while you were in the military. You what was your MOS? What did you do while you were in?
Yeah, yeah. So I went in as a an 0621, which for those of you who aren't familiar with the MOS structure, I was a field radio operator. Um, had a kind of unique experience where I was actually at comm school out in 29 Palms, had a class of like 34 35 people or something along those lines. We were getting ready, I'm sure you know how it goes, but you take these tests, and then you're kind of assigned duty stations. And for us, the order you got to kind of a request, not necessarily get where you want to go, but request where you want to go, was kind of based off of how you scored in the classroom activity. So we were getting ready to kind of make those decisions and make our requests. And we had a master guns walk into our classroom one day, stopped, looked at us, and he said, "I need 16 bodies that want to go to Hawaii right this second." And and basically, the whole class raises their hand, and he
Yep.
said, "All right, fine. I was going to take half from this class, half from the next one, but you're all going." And so actually all 34 or 35, whatever it actually was, of us ended up graduating comm school and going out to Kaneohe Bay together. because we had such a large group, we were actually attached to regiment. So
Okay.
3-3 regimental. And it was kind of, it wasn't actually a great scenario based off of what I had hoped to do in the Marine Corps. I was hoping to attach to a unit and try to deploy, as I think so many of us do when we enlist. That's kind of part of the goal.
Yeah.
Maybe not for everybody, but especially for those joining the Marine Corps, we tend to be a little crazy. Um, but because there were so many students, to be honest with you, we were kind of treated like it was an extension of comm school all over again. When you have 35 people, they're all new to the Marine, to active duty, so to speak.
Yeah.
um, to keep them all in line and to keep things moving, they kind of treated it just like an extension of the schoolhouse. And nobody really loved that. I don't think the leadership loved it. I know us as new Marines, we didn't love it. And so it took the group that wanted to deploy and it made it so we really, really wanted to deploy because that was our ticket out of there.
Yeah.
And so it became this game where we had 1-3, 2-3, 3-3, and then a handful of tertiary units out there in Hawaii. And every time they would go on deployment, they would call regiment and say, hey, we need a radio operator. We need 4 radio operators or whatever it was. And because so many of us wanted to go, they would literally draw names out of a hat.
Wow.
Yeah. So, you have all these people vying for a spot. They're drawing names out of a hat. And you just start to get a little crazy when people are going and you're stuck in this kind of schoolhouse environment all over again. And so what I did was I actually started cross training and I picked up a secondary MOS.
Oh,
I figured if I could make myself more useful, my chances of getting out of there sooner would be a little better. So I had a Sergeant Jones. He was an 0622, which is a MUX radio operator, multiplexer operator.
okay.
And so I picked up that secondary MOS relatively quickly, got scooped up by 3-3. And then in 2010, headed to Afghanistan with 3-3, acting as both a multiplexer operator and as a radio operator. And so that was what the bulk of my time in service was doing. But I actually had an additional MOS once I came back. I had an early goal when I was going through training. You go through boot camp and you get your first little taste of water training. And
Oh, yeah.
for us, we have instructors in that, which are called McQuIS, which is Marine Corps Instructor of Water Survival. And I've always loved the water. And so early on, I said, man, that's what I really want to do at some point. It turns out I had basically selected one of arguably one of, if not the most difficult schools that you can go to within the Marine Corps. And so after deployment, I finally got the opportunity to go. There's a few criteria that you have to meet to even try to go to that school.
Yeah.
So I had finally kind of gotten those met the criteria and headed over to Cali in early 2011, I believe, and then became an 0918, which is a Marine Corps Instructor of Water Survival, and got to spend a lot of the last bits of my time in the Marine Corps doing swim qualifications and doing open water trainings and doing water safety stuff when we being that we do a lot of training in the water, not just in terms of swimming, but ship to ship, landing with assault, combat assault company and their VICs and stuff like that. Got to spend a lot of time in and around the water, which was a pretty cool experience for me.
Wow. That's wow. So many hats there between the two different communications, a radio operator. You said flux operator as well.
MUX, yeah,
Mux operator.
MUX multiplexer, yeah.
Multiplex, okay. And the swim instructing and all of that. Wow, that's a lot. So it sounds like you got the chance to do quite a bit while you were in, and you were able to take that and how did you transfer those skills when you got out of the military?
Yeah, that's something that's still a work in progress, to be honest
Yeah,
with you. So got out, I think I mentioned 2012, October 2012. I applied for university. Obviously, I had earned the GI Bill during my time
yeah,
in the Marine Corps. So I got out and applied immediately to Ohio State. being from the Cleveland area, I'm a lifelong Buckeye fan, had always
Oh yeah.
wanted to go to Ohio State. And it was actually the only school that I applied to. So I kind of put all my eggs in one basket, which maybe I don't recommend for others. Um, but I was fortunate. I got accepted and was enrolled at university by January of 2013. So between October and January, moved from Hawaii to Cleveland, Cleveland to Columbus, got
Wow.
situated down there. Um, I started, I in the academic portion, it was pretty intimidating. Since you kind of had a similar trajectory, um, I had gone to college right out of high school with that kind of last minute audible, and it was really not a successful situation for me. The honest truth is, I just did not know how I best learned at that time. I wasn't a
Same.
good student, and I didn't understand how to be one.
Yeah.
And the Marine Corps really gave me a lot of the tools that I needed to figure that out. And to be honest with you, it was that Marine Corps instructor of water survival piece that I really think kind of took it over the edge, because um, it's really not only physically demanding, but academically a very demanding program, which is why it has such a high attrition rate. And so through that, I kind of learned how I learned.
Yeah.
But going off to college was still a pretty scary and intimidating thing. I knew I needed to work going into school just to pay some of the bills that we had. I was already married, and we weren't going to live on campus and all that stuff since I had a spouse. Um, and so I knew I needed to work. So I took a job actually as a lifeguard on campus. And that was one of those things where, hey, how can I take skill A, transition it into what needs to be skill B, and do it pretty seamlessly. And being that I knew kind of what came with the McQuist job being very high skill, high demand, high requirement to do that, I figured that being a campus lifeguard would probably be pretty easy. And so I could focus on that schoolwork. And so that's what I did. And then, through university, I was really involved still in the veteran community at that time. I actually was on a board for a nonprofit called One Day for the KIA,
Oh,
which they host a couple events annually. At the time, they were actually hosting a 24-hour ultra marathon, which for those who aren't familiar, we literally had folks who would come out, run for 24 hours straight. And some of these folks would do 100, 115, 120 miles by themselves just in a 24-hour period
oh my
on a
gosh.
loop track. And we used the funds we raised from that to create an endowment, which actually created a couple scholarships, which were granted to students who were related to family members who were either killed in action or missing in action, or 100% disabled from their time in service. So that was a pretty fulfilling thing, and obviously
Yeah.
a lot of those skills that I took from the service kind of transitioned to that. I also stayed busy. I was in a Ohio State. For those who don't know, I know a lot of the universities are very different, but they are an incredible university when it comes to supporting student veterans. They have an on-campus house. It's basically a former frat house where it's called the Vet House, where they host students. You have to apply and get into that, which I didn't live in that house, but I had a lot of buddies who did, and it's a great place to transition kind of from that veteran lifestyle and get accustomed into campus. But then they have a program called the Student Veteran Liaison, and basically they take a handful of veterans. I can't remember exactly how many it was at the time. They give each of you like a $1,000 budget or something along those lines, maybe a little more, and they ask you to create some type of programming that you believe will benefit the veteran, student veteran population on and around campus. So I was fortunate to applied for that, was selected for that program. In my first year with the program, I put together two events where we had actually Frank LaRose, who's an Ohio politician here. He
Yeah.
also was I believe, a Green Beret
Oh,
prior to his time in politics. Had an event
okay.
where he
Okay.
came and spoke to some students about that transition, and then hosted another event that was kind of to celebrate student veteran graduation, uh, which we did a great job of supporting veterans while they were students, but we didn't really have anything to kind of cap off and really celebrate the final achievement. So put together a big event for that. They both ended up being really successful, so they asked me to come back and kind of head the program the next year. So stayed really involved in the veteran community, which has always been important to me.
Certainly.
But then, to be honest with you, after I graduated, I didn't really know how to take those veteran skills that I had accumulated and really turn them into what I wanted to do. So my undergrad degree was in security and intelligence with a minor in Arabic language. So in my head, I was thinking, probably a three-letter agency. Maybe I'll try to go FBI or CIA or something in that world.
Right.
And then I did a study abroad at the very end of my time in university, where I went because interestingly, up to that point, the only time I had ever left the United States was when I went to Afghanistan.
Wow.
Yeah, so I really had no experience outside of the United States, and that was something I wanted to change. So I did the study abroad. It took me over to England and Ireland, where we did an intensive case study on the Troubles, which, for anyone who may not be familiar, obviously there has been a significant and extended conflict between England and Ireland because of the English territory in the northern nine counties of Northern Ireland. And so we did a case study on that and some of the events tied to it and the resolution process that eventually came to be in that. And then we actually traveled over to Jordan, over to the Middle East, and we were discussing whether any of the various resolution processes of the Troubles could potentially be applicable to some of the various conflicts that exist throughout the Middle East.
Yeah.
And so that experience was just incredibly eye-opening. To be a Marine where, conflict can kind of be the name of the game. It doesn't have to be, but oftentimes can be. And then going into a study, a program where conflict resolution is really the name of the game.
Yeah.
It was an interesting juxtaposition, and it kind of opened some my eyes to some things in the world. And then travel, I think, is just one of the greatest learning tools that exists. Getting to experience new places, new cultures, and then all the things that come with that was just super eye-opening. So I actually came out of that program still trying to figure out, like, okay, do I want to go three-letter agency or something else? And I actually I was struggling to find something. I found lots of opportunities I wanted to do, but maybe wasn't quite qualified for, or they didn't believe I was qualified for.
Yeah.
And then I was getting opportunities that just I felt overqualified for, where, like, I don't, that's not what I want to do. And I was being a little picky, and I kind of on a whim applied for a master's degree program. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Rotary Club.
Yeah. Okay.
But the Rotary Club has a program called the Rotary Peace Fellowship, which is an incredible program in which they have selected, I think it's 6 campuses spread out throughout the world. So here in the United States, Duke University is there, or at least at the time was their local campus. Then there's one in England, one in Japan, one in Sweden, one in Australia, etc.
Wow. Okay.
So, and they basically every year they send 10 students on a full ride scholarship. So tuition and fees, room and board, transportation. They pay you a wage so that you can focus on your studies. And then they, in addition to the master's program, they put together some programming where you kind of travel around and meet with folks at the Nobel Peace Institute, folks who are members of parliament in England or Ireland, and involved in political processes around the world and involved in conflict resolution processes around the world. And you get to kind of experience all that. And in return, they ask you to kind of travel to some of these Rotary clubs and speak about what you're studying, what you're learning, who you're interacting with, and the things that come with that. So I applied for this program really thinking, I threw my hat in the ring thinking I have no chance of being selected. There's 10 students. You only get to select the one university you want to go to. And so you've got 10 slots essentially. Interestingly enough, I was selected as number 11. I was the first alternative. So I kind of moved on. I said, oh well, it's not my time. They said, hey, come back and apply next year. You're a really competitive applicant, or you wouldn't have made it this far. And I just said, I think I'm a little older than I'd like to be going into the application process the next time, because it's an extensive application
Yeah.
process with interviews and questions. It takes quite a while, about a little over a year, just in that process itself. And so I went, bought a house. I signed my mortgage at 7 a.m. And at noon on the very same day, I get a call and they said, hey, one of the students couldn't get a visa to be in the country. Could you be in England in a month? Um, and so,
Oh my
obviously,
gosh.
given everything that I just described, being a once in a lifetime opportunity, you can't really say no to that. So my wife and I talked it out, and she felt the same way. As much as she'd love to have me living in our new house with her, she couldn't ask me to give up this opportunity either. And so about a month and a half later, I packed up and headed to England, where I was living for basically the next 2 years. Um, and so that was probably, I think, mid 2017 through into early 2019
Oh
that
my
I was over
gosh.
there. Yeah.
That's that's got to be part of your military experience, just knowing how to navigate being away from your wife.
Yeah. Well, that was something that we did find confidence in, being
Yeah.
that we were married early in my Marine Corps career.
Yeah.
So whether it was training, going out to CACs and preparing for Afghanistan and doing workups, or the actual deployment itself,
Yeah.
of the 4 years I was in the Marine Corps, we probably spent half of it away from each other.
Right.
Maybe even a touch more, to be honest with you. And so it was a bit of confidence that we had, thinking, what, we've done this before, we can do it again. And interestingly enough, the second time was a lot harder.
Yeah. Yeah.
not
Yeah, for
only
sure.
not only was it a lot longer period of time, but it turns out, when you're deployed and you can't really communicate well, because you can't make phone calls and you don't always have Wi-Fi access to hop on a Zoom or whatever.
Right.
It's under your spouse tends to understand. But when you're in a master's program and you really have no excuse to not utilize those things, but you don't do it as often as you should, it creates a little bit more discomfort. So it
Ooh,
was a
challenging.
tricky situation. Yeah.
Yeah, that's goodness, yeah. And imagine if you were to have done the military for 20 years, how much time you would have spent apart.
Yeah.
So this is definitely a happy medium there, to be able to get some experience that, I mean, nobody can really say they've done what you've done. That's a very rare experience to be able to have done that.
Unique, rare, and fortunate. I feel very blessed, for all of the opportunities that I've had in my life. I've been very fortunate in a lot of ways, and that was
Yeah.
certainly, one of the ones that's near the top of the list, because it was a pretty magical experience, to be honest with you.
Yeah, well, that sounds very, very, very interesting. And I guess so from that point to where you are now, and I want to get into what's next here
Yeah.
shortly, but between that time abroad and what led you to this point, what are some highlights uh, from your career that you've had because of those experiences?
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the greatest highlights of that time, and it's relevant to my career, but in some ways not, was just the opportunity to travel.
Yeah,
Um, as I mentioned earlier, prior to that study abroad, which was in 2016, I had never left the US with the exception of Afghanistan. And now I find myself in, 2017, 2018, living in England. And really, the ease of travel in Europe is just a completely different ballgame. In the US, we have it state to state, obviously. And
Yeah,
a lot of us never leave the US because we just have such a huge country with so much to offer, geographically and for fun and experience and all of that stuff. But over there, you can just go country to country. You could be living on the border of one country and grocery shopping in another.
that's
Um,
crazy.
and so what I would do is I would set little alerts on travel sites. So if a flight to Dublin or to France or to Germany dropped under 50 euros or 30 euros depending on which location it was, I'd get an alert and I would just scoop up a ticket. And so I got to see probably 10 or 11 different countries maybe, uh, just in that short 2 year period. And as I said earlier, I really wholeheartedly believe that, like, if you want to learn, reading and traveling are two of the absolutely greatest ways to do so.
Yeah,
And so just having the opportunity to hop around, to, like I said, see different cultures, get different experiences, meet people, just local folks, and chat with them about their life, their daily ins and outs, their political beliefs, their religious beliefs, and just to take that in and truly listen and learn. Um, it's really one of the major things that I think set me up for success heading into the venture I'm heading into. And ironically, it was a lot of that travel that really guided me towards the business that I'm starting now. So to kind of introduce that, what I'm creating here in Cleveland, I have made arrangements to purchase a building. This building is a former funeral home built in the late 1800s and operated as a funeral home for nearly 100 years. So just kind of an interesting tidbit. But it's actually been vacant for a little over 10 years. So it's a full renovation job, which is kind of where we're at in the process now, just getting into this renovation. But what I'm creating inside is kind of a men's style retail space where you could come in and buy anything from, shoes, socks, underwears, jeans, your daily essentials, into the business casual world. But what I'm kind of specializing in, so to speak, is suiting. And so what I wanted to do was take a large space and create the retail element, but then create a kind of hidden speakeasy entertainment element where, say for example, you're getting married, you got six buddies coming with you in your groomsmen party, and you all need to go get fitted for suits. You could come into my space. We'd take you into the entertaining side of the house where we would actually measure you up one by one. But while each of you is individually getting measured, in that same space, you could be playing pool, throwing darts, having a drink, a cocktail or whatever. Turn on the game and watch a game. And so it's kind of taking that suiting experience, and making it more of an experience, as
oh my
opposed to
gosh,
just
yeah,
going in and getting suited. But what I was alluding to is when I was doing all of this travel overseas, instead of buying little knickknacks and things as kind of travel keepsakes, what I really liked to collect is hats.
yeah.
I'm a really big hat guy. I always have been. And so I found myself on these travels trying to find cool places to find a hat as a keepsake. And so I'd do Google searches or I'd ask folks in the pub, hey, where should I go? And oftentimes where I would end up is in men's suiting stores and retail stores. And I started to have this kind of recurring experience where you walk in, they say, what can I help you find? I respond and they go, you're not from here. Correct. Yep. You're from America. It's usually a pretty obvious, they can usually spot us from a mile away.
Yeah.
And then they'd want to know, well, why are you here? Why are you in my shop? Why are you in this place? And I'd kind of get into the whole story. And and it turned into a really fun experience where that's a lot of those spots were a lot of the places where I was having these interactions, and I was talking about culture and politics and religion, and got into some of these deeper conversations, and sometimes not deep conversations. Sometimes it was just fun and kind of BSing and having enjoying each other's company. Um,
Wow.
but I walked into one shop in particular, and the gentleman said, "Can I offer you a beer?" I said, "Yes, please." And he turned around, and in the wall, he actually pulled open a hatch on the wall, a little hidden hatch. And behind it was two beer taps, for some keg beer. And he poured me a glass. And in that moment, it just it kind of blew my mind. I thought it was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. And that's when my wheels were really turning, going, man, I would love to do something like this when I go back home. Where could I go to get this experience? What men's clothing store can I have these conversations, or any store for that matter? And where can I grab this beer and have this kind of hidden, mind blowing experience? And the more I racked my brain trying to figure out where I could do that, whether it's in Cleveland or really anywhere else I had been up to that point in the United States, I couldn't really think of anywhere.
No.
Um, and then that's when the wheels really got going and saying, well, maybe I could fill that gap someday. And the fact of the matter is, it started as a long-term goal. I was thinking on it and planning, and I had notebooks where I'm jotting down ideas. And even when I would tell people, what I would say is, 5 years from now, 6 years from now, I need to get my things in order. I need to get my finances in order. I need to prepare this, prepare that. But then, sure enough, things started to kind of fall in place, and so here we are, about 5 years sooner than I thought it would be, and we're getting ready to start renovations on this building.
Isn't it funny how that works? You put a timeline out there and everything just starts to manifest. And the more you think it into reality, the closer it actually comes to happening. And yeah, I was gonna ask you if you got a bunch of your styles from being overseas, and I figured that that was the case.
Yep.
The hat reminds me of the Peaky Blinders hats.
I
Do you have
love Peaky Blinders.
you got the razor blades on the brim there?
I can't tell you, people got to find that out the hard way, or hopefully not find out the hard
Don't mess with Zach. Don't mess with
way.
Zach. Um, so, oh man, that's awesome. You're right. You can't find that experience anywhere. If you do, it's gonna be another rare type of situation where
Yeah.
you stumble onto it. But yeah, I mean, I go to Men's Warehouse and it's fine, but you gotta
Yeah.
wait forever. There's nothing to do. You're just like looking at the ties and waiting for somebody to help you. And but yeah, if you make an experience out of it, that's almost like quasi like part of a bachelor party.
It, exactly.
or like a pre-bachelor party, and we're just going to get fitted today, guys. But
Yep.
there's some other cool things that we'll be able to do, uh, especially in the location that you're in. You're
Yeah.
gonna be in an awesome place in Ohio City, one of the coolest areas of Cleveland.
Yeah.
Uh, to
Absolutely.
to be able to go there and hang out all day to do that, that'd be awesome.
And that's really, I hope that people will utilize this space the way you just said. My hope is that they come in for the suiting, and they go, man, we had such a good time there. Let's kick off the bachelor party night before here. Let's come in for an hour or two pre-bachelor party. Or hey, let's rent out this space, and we'll actually come here before the wedding, and we'll get dressed here.
Yeah.
You could rent out that space, come in, you can take your time getting dressed. We can help you pick out the right accessories. We could bring in a photographer. We could bring in a barber and get you shaved up. And again, all the while you're enjoying a cocktail, you're playing some pool. It's not something that I know of that really exists around here yet. And so I'm excited to try to bring it to life.
Oh goodness, and there's so many great venues down there to have the wedding, to have the reception, all within that area that I'm sure you've already started networking with many of those places to build those partnerships. So
I
uh
am, yeah, absolutely.
very, very exciting. So when's the launch date? I guess I'm sorry if I missed that, but when is the planned launch?
Yeah, so right now I am hoping for maybe a July, August timeframe opening. One of the issues is that is contingent on a construction timeline.
Yeah.
And as anyone who's familiar with the construction process knows that sometimes it works with your schedule and sometimes it doesn't. And being that this building is over 100 years old, that it has been vacant for over 10 years, I'm just really crossing my fingers and hoping that it's minimal bumps and bruises along the way, and we can stick to that timeline as close as possible.
Got it. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
that's a really good target, and of course, I certainly hope that you get there as close to that target as possible, because I know you're just rearing to get going here.
I
Um,
am.
and so we're up against time here, but I wanted to make sure, was there anything that you wanted me to ask you that I just haven't gotten to yet? Anything in particular that you want to make sure we cover today?
Yeah, there's a big piece of the puzzle that we didn't really get to, and that is the
Yes.
nonprofit element of
Yep.
the business that I'm starting. So obviously the business is as we just described to folks here. But I mentioned before in my undergrad, I had all these experience with different veterans organizations, and obviously served in the military. I come from a military family, and so this isn't just a community I care about. It's my community. It's my people. It's my friends. It's my family. And so I have I not only know what it's like to make that transition, both from civilian into and then from veteran back to civilian life, but I also have seen so many people that I care about who have been impacted in different ways, mentally, physically. I think a lot of folks. I don't have to name the numbers, but a lot of folks are familiar with the homelessness issues we have in the veteran community, the addiction issues we have in the veteran community, the 22 suicides a day that we have in the veteran community. And those are all things that I want to find a way to impact. So this nonprofit that I'm putting together is still in the works, but essentially what I plan to do is in partnership with the business, um, being that I'll be doing suiting, again, to use you as an example, if you come in to make a purchase, whether it's just you're getting some new business suits or you're doing your wedding thing or whatever in between, you could actually bring in an old suit or suits if you've got multiple.
Mm.
I will take those garments in on a trade, and offer you a discount on your new purchase. My plan is to build an inventory of these secondhand garments. And then based off of how many of those we can collect, I'm hoping that, at least a couple times a year, I can host a larger scale event where we could bring a group of veterans in. Um, Hopefully my hope is that we can find some folks who are dealing with some of those issues that I mentioned, whether it's homelessness or coming out of programs or whatever else it may be, trying to get their way back into the working world. And then we can get them a haircut, we can get them suited up, we can do some headshots and some photographs so they have something professional to send in. We can do
Yeah.
some resume reviews, do some mock interviews. Basically just do a 1 or 2 day event where we kind of do our best to get them prepped to transition back into the working world. And in the long term, that's kind of a nearer term goal for the organization. And in the longer term, ideally, what I really love to be able to do is hire some of these folks myself, bring them into the suit shop, maybe find some ways to get them some nearby housing or subsidize some housing, so that not only can I help them um, prepare for that transition, but I can help be a part of that transition and then send them off into the working world where they'll go and take those veteran leadership qualities that they have, the opportunity to kind of get back on their feet and gain a little stability and go from there and create the successful lives that we know that they're capable of having.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes you just need a little bit of time. Sometimes you just need a little bit of time
Absolutely.
just to breathe and be able to get the ground underneath you, to find that bigger purpose that you have, and to be able to have support like that, to be able to get out of the military and have a place to go where you don't have to worry about 100% of the things that an adult has to worry about. My gosh, that would be incredible. It sounds like a really, really positive initiative, Zach. And I do have one more question for you. I
Please,
have
yeah.
so if you could go back in time and give yourself a bit of advice to a former version of yourself, when would you go back in time? To what point in your life would you go back in time, and what would you say to yourself?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would probably go back to the time period just before I went into the Marine Corps. And it's kind of cliche, but honestly, the advice I would give myself is get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah,
Um, in the military, I think that's something we hear a lot, but sometimes you hear these kind of cliche sounding things in the military, and it's kind of like, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. You're like, right, that's important. I know
yeah,
that. Um, but what I've found is in all of these experiences, almost all of these experiences in my life, um, right when I thought I knew what I was going to do, I was wrong. Whether it's when I thought I was going to enlist in the Marine Corps and then my dad passed away, or then I thought I was going into real estate and then I was into the Marine Corps. I thought I'd be a lifer in the Marine Corps and then I went and got my undergraduate degree. I thought I'd go into the FBI and then I went into a master's program overseas in conflict resolution. And it was always those times where right when I thought I knew, I was very wrong. And then what I learned on the other side of that is the moments where I kind of embraced the fact that I didn't quite know. I'm just going to kind of take it as it comes. I feel like those were the moments where I had the most success. And I grew the most and I learned the most and have turned that into something else. I've described today a lot of ups that I've had in my life, but the honest truth is there's been a lot of downs in between and during a lot of these ups.
that's right.
I spent 2 years overseas that I loved. It was really, really taxing on my marriage. And then I came back with really high expectations for what I could achieve in a career, and I couldn't find it. I came out of the military so used to this camaraderie and this brotherhood that I valued so much. And then I found myself really feeling alone so often because you just don't have that same network and that
That's
same
right.
access that you have on a daily basis. And a lot of those times I felt really low. I felt really lonely. But when I look back now at those times, it was those moments of loneliness where I was accomplishing really big things. I was visualizing this business and this nonprofit that now is growing into a real thing. I was searching for opportunities that were outside the box, and then I end up with this overseas program. And so, finding the mindset and the positivity in those moments to say, hey, I don't know, but that's okay. As long as I keep a positive mindset and I'm willing to embrace the challenge that comes next, and I can embrace a little ambiguity and the fact that I don't know, and sometimes even just enjoy that. Sometimes when you have a path that's right in front of you, you're so focused on hitting each step to get to the next one that you don't really get to enjoy where you're at
Right.
necessarily. And so having that kind of focus and that clarity to see that and understand it, it makes those times really not as seem as bad as they may have felt in the moment. And so I really think that would be, as cliche as it sounds, that would be the big advice that I would give myself.
So to recap that's getting comfortable being uncomfortable and living in the moment as often as you possibly can. But it does sound like, with the transitions that you've had throughout your life, you've done a lot of different things. You've kind of jumped in head first, and then right when you got comfortable, it's like, all right, it's time to do something to get uncomfortable again, and then you just enjoy it while you're doing it. You try not to get too far ahead, but that's uh
Exactly.
that's awesome,
Exactly.
man. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Zach, I definitely appreciate you taking some time to chat with me today. I'm going to make sure that that I put some good notes in on the post here, and of course, feel free to add anything to that. I'm going to stay on with you here for a few minutes as we wrap up, but just wanted to say I hope everybody enjoyed this conversation. Please reach out to Zach if you have any additional questions,
Absolutely.
or
Yeah.
if you want to learn more about what he's doing. He's got a lot of good things to talk about, and I'm sure he'd be willing to collaborate. And if you have things that you want some advice on, go to him. He's been through quite a bit.
Yeah, if I could make one quick plug here.
Yeah.
Obviously, folks can find me on LinkedIn. I know that's how we connected.
Yep.
I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. That stuff's personally, if you want to hear my nonsense, you can go there. But for the business side, the business here in Cleveland is called Sartorial, Sartorial. And then it's CLE at the end, as in Cleveland. So Sartorial CLE. You can find me on the Facebook, Instagram, and all that stuff there. And I'd love to connect with people, fire questions away, talk about nonsense or the good stuff or anything in between. I love connecting with people, and I'd be happy to do so.
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Zach. All right, I'm going to stop the recording here.